Hi, this is William from Great Affordable Watches, and in this video I'm gonna review and compare two watches from Spinnaker, the Spinnaker Fleuss on the right and the new Spinnaker Spence on the left. I will leave both of the reference numbers in the description. Before we go into the specifications, we can clearly see that this watch is inspired by the very famous Blancpain 50 Fathoms, while this new Spence is something a bit more original, and I can't really pinpoint one watch it is based off. So this is, in my opinion, more of an original design, while this is more of a homage. But I think a homage to the great 50 Fathoms is still a really nice thing. Okay, let's go into the specifications, and we can start off with what they have in common. They both have the same lug width of 22 millimeters and the same movement, the Seiko NH35, which features both hacking and hand winding, and it's a proven workhorse movement. The Fleuss have a sapphire crystal, while the Spence have a mineral crystal. The Fleuss got a case size of 43 millimeters in diameter. The Spence got a case size of 41 millimeters in diameter. The Spence got a case thickness of around 13.25 millimeters. And the Spence got a case thickness of around 14 millimeters. The Spence is water resistant down to 20 ATM or 200 meters, while the Fleuss is water resistant down to 150 meters or 15 ATM. The Fleuss have a acrylic bezel insert, while the Spence have a stainless steel bezel insert. First off, I will say that both of these watches are among my favorite Spinnaker watches I have taken a look at, and while they offer a bit different looks, they are both great watches, but as with any watch, there are some downsides, as we're gonna go into later. But we can start off with the Fleuss, and this is the blue dial version, and as I said, it's based on the famous 50 Fathoms from Blancpain. We got that crystal insert, which is really nice looking, and this is a heavily vintage inspired watch, while the Spence is more modern in its look, and as I said before, something more original, at least in my opinion. Both of the watches features a screw down crown, and this one have the very vintage looking no crown guard look, while this one of course have crown guards. This watch got a really nice case. It got brushed lugs, brushed sides, and a really nice chamfer between the lugs and the sides, and I really appreciate a nice chamfer. I think it gives the watch a really nice look, and especially when both of the sides here are brushed, it gives it some contrast. I must say that the dial on this watch is really nice looking. I think the touch of red here at the bottom looks really nice, and the dial got some texture to it, which is really subtle but still looks great. And this is a pretty clean dial, a pretty clean and vintage looking dial, which suits this type of watch perfectly. The downside, in my opinion, is the case size of this watch. I think this is a vintage inspired watch, and I think the case size is a bit too big for a vintage inspired watch like this. I would prefer a 39, perhaps a 40 millimeter version of this, and if this watch was around 39 millimeters, I think this would be a real winner, as I think it's a bit too big for me right now, but it's still a great watch, especially for the price of around $285 US, and the Spence goes for 245. And I believe that's thanks to the higher finishing on the case and the crystal bezel insert. The Spence is also really nice looking. This watch is more modern and perhaps military inspired, with the bed blasted case, which is really nicely done, by the way. And we got a no marker insert, bezel insert, except for the 12 to 3 o'clock. And this gives it a very stealthy look, which I appreciate, but I think some people will dislike the no marker bezel insert. This watch is a bit more understated and modern, and but I think that the red touch here on the dial, as well as on the Fleuss, looks really nice, and it gives it a bit of contrast versus the very subtle or stealthy look otherwise. And as I said, this watch also got a screw down crown. This crown is really big, very solid, and I must say I really like the look of the big crown on this watch. And while I prefer a no crown guard look, I think this is really nicely made. Both of these watches have a see-through case back, and you can see the Seiko NH35 movement inside with basically the same rotor, which is a very typical Spinnaker. I'm not the biggest fan of the look of this movement. It's a really workhorse movement, so I would prefer a decorated solid case back instead, but it's always pretty cool to see a mechanical movement. And to sum this up, I think both of these watches offers really good value for your money, and I think Spinnaker is really growing as a brand, and they offer some really good watches in the affordable segment, and these two watches are absolutely one of the better watches they are offering, at least in my opinion. So if you like a more vintage inspired watch, I think this is a great alternative, and if you want a more modern inspired military looking watch, the new Spence is also a great option. There are a couple of downsides, as I said. I think especially this one wears a bit too big, as we're gonna see when I do a wrist shot. I think they should do a smaller version of this watch, and I would prefer a smaller version of this one as well. It wears pretty big, and also, as with most Spinnaker watches and Seiko watches with Seiko movements, these two are pretty thick, and especially this watch, so I would prefer a smaller case thickness. Both of these watches have really nice bezel action. It's very solid, especially the Spence. It feels really solid, basically no play at all, and it's pretty tactile as well, so that's great. And of course the coin edge bezel here is a bit harder to grip, but it's still very solid, especially in this price range. I believe the Spence have a bit more solid bezel action, but this is great as well. Okay, we're gonna do a quick wrist shot so you can see how these two watches look on my wrist. Okay, be right back. Okay, here is the Spence, and as we can see, I think it sits quite nicely on my wrist. The case size of 41mm do pay off when it comes to wearability on my 7-inch wrist. I think from this perspective it sits really nicely, and I must say it looks really good. It's a bit of a shame that the case thickness is pretty big, so yeah, it wears pretty thick, but otherwise the size is good. Okay, let's switch to Fleuss and see how it sits on my wrist. Okay, here's the Fleuss, and as we can see, this watch clearly wears a lot bigger than the Spence. It's a bit of a shame that it's as big as it is. I'm sure that a lot of people will like this size. It's not that big for today's standard, but Because this is a vintage inspired watch, I would prefer a smaller case size. Okay, let me know, do you prefer the Fleuss or the Spence? I think for me it's a pretty tough decision. I prefer the case size and the fit on the Spence, but I'm a big fan of a 50 Fathoms Homage. While they are pretty similar in many respects, I think they wear and look very different, so they will suit different needs, in my opinion. So let me know down in the comment section, which watch do you prefer? Do you prefer the Fleuss or the Spence? Let me know down in the comment section what you think. And if you like this video, please leave a like and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And I hope I see you in the next one. Bye.